Dad announced he was giving the company to my brother at midnight in front of 140 people. I let him finish his speech. Then I filed 42 pages with the SEC. The smile left his face at 12:11. My father said my brother's name like a verdict, the one who actually earned it. 140 people raised their glasses. The 12-piece band held its note. Confetti waited in its cannons. The champagne towers threw light across the ceiling of the Grand Meridian Ballroom like something from a dream my father had been building toward for 40 years. My husband Nathan squeezed my hand. I opened my clutch. I want you to understand the specific quality of that moment, the weight of a room in full celebration, the sound of a countdown beginning, my father standing at a microphone in his best suit, looking out at the assembled proof of everything he had built, genuinely happy, genuinely proud, genuinely certain that this was the night his legacy locked into place. I want you to understand that because what I did next was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It was not the action of a daughter who was hurt and wanted her father to hurt back. It was the action of a VP of finance who had spent 14 months building a federal case and who had chosen this specific moment with the same precision she brought to every material decision she had ever made. 10, 9, 8, the draft loaded, 7, 6, 42 pages attached, 5, 4. You're sure? Nathan said, his mouth close to my ear. 3. I've been sure for 14 months. 2. 1 breath. 1. Fireworks on the terrace, the room exploding. My father's smile at full power. I pressed the button. Submission received. Reference number SECWB 2541738. Timestamp 12:03 a.m. I locked my phone. I picked up my champagne. I took 1 sip. Then I waited for 11 minutes. My name is Evelyn Sears Whitmore. I am 36 years old, and I have been the VP of Finance at Sears Meridian Group since I was 32, which made me the youngest person to hold that title in the company's history, and the only woman, which is context rather than complaint. My father, Gerald Sears, built Sears Meridian from 1 truck and a line of credit in 1988. The company manufactures and distributes industrial components, unglamorous, essential, the kind of business that runs on relationships and margins, and the ability to keep extremely precise books. It went public in 2014. By last year, it had $340 million in annual revenue and 412 employees. I want to be specific about what I contributed to those numbers. I rebuilt the internal audit system at 28 after discovering that the previous system had 3 significant gaps that had been masking cost overruns in 2 divisions for 6 years. The rebuild took 11 months and produced $4.2 million in recovered margin in the first year. I restructured $47 million in debt during a liquidity crisis at 30, a crisis that had been precipitated by an acquisition my father made without adequate due diligence, which I had flagged in a memo 14 months before the crisis arrived. The memo is in my files. I have always kept my files. I have been the first person in the building every morning for 8 years, not performatively, because the work requires it and I am the person who does the work. My brother Colton joined the company 3 years ago. He was 30 at the time. He had an undergraduate degree in communications and a career history that consisted primarily of 3 jobs in sales-adjacent roles, none of which he had held for more than 2 years. He had the quality of a man who had grown up knowing a safety net existed and had made his peace with the ceiling that creates. He was also genuinely charming, which is not a small thing in a company where client relationships matter, and I want to acknowledge that because the story I am telling is not about a person who contributed nothing. It is about a person who contributed less than was credited to him and more than was appropriate to the legal definition of fraud. He got a corner office, an assistant, a company credit card with a $50,000 monthly limit and no approval requirement under $25,000. He got a title, Chief of Business Development, that had been created for him 3 weeks before he was hired, which I know because I reviewed the org chart update and noted the absence of a job description or scope of work. He got no accountability. The first quarter after his arrival, the board praised the company's performance. My father stood at the head of the table and thanked the team. The next day, he bought Colton a new car, a black Range Rover, which I mentioned not for its value, but because I passed it in the parking lot every morning for 3 years, first in, last past it, on my way to the building. I told myself it was nepotism. Ordinary, infuriating, common nepotism. I told myself I had seen it before, and I could continue to do my work at the standard I held myself to, and the record would be the record. I told myself a lot of things over 2 years. Then I ran the audit. 14 months before New Year's Eve, I conducted a routine audit on Colton's division. Routine is accurate. I run them quarterly on all divisions. This was the Q3 review of business development, which I had been deferring for 6 weeks because of the debt restructuring project, which is why the Q3 numbers had not been closely scrutinized yet when I finally sat down with them on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. 12 new vendor contracts had been executed in the previous 18 months under Colton's authorization. 3 of them shared a receiving account. The vendor names were Greystone Industrial Supply, LLC, Greystone Logistics Solutions, Inc., Greystone Supply Group, different names, same P.O. box in Delaware, same receiving account at a bank in Nevada, no website, no employees listed in any state registry, no physical office address that matched any known location, no evidence of any goods or services delivered to any Sears Meridian facility at any time. 18 months of wire transfers, each one structured at $49,800, just under the $50,000 threshold that triggers enhanced reporting requirements. 187 transactions across 24 pay periods, total paid to entities that had delivered nothing, $1.2 million. I printed every document, organized them chronologically on my dining room table, stood over them for a long time. Nathan came in from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside me. me. He read without speaking for 12 minutes. Someone told your brother exactly how to structure this, he said. His voice had the flat quality it gets when he's moved out of conversation and into analysis. Nathan is a litigation attorney. He has been practicing for 11 years. He does not overstate things. The threshold structuring is deliberate. Each transaction is individually below the enhanced reporting trigger. Collectively, they constitute intentional evasion. He looked at me. And it's not just fraud. The company is publicly traded. Every quarterly SEC filing that included these vendor payments as legitimate business expenses is materially misstated. Securities fraud. You need to file a whistleblower complaint, he said. SEC, Dodd-Frank. Your identity is protected. The submission is confidential. And if it results in sanctions over $1 million, you're entitled to a percentage of the recovery. I looked at the stack of documents. I'm the VP of Finance, I said. I signed the Q2 filing. You signed it before you knew, he said. There's a clear discovery timeline. October 15th is when you ran the audit. Everything before that is documented ignorance. Everything after that is what you do with what you know. I sat down. How long do these investigations take? 12 to 18 months from initial submission to enforcement pipeline. Sometimes longer. He looked at me. You'd be building the case during that time. The more complete your submission, the faster the process. I looked at the documents on the table. Start a file, I said. I filed at 11:47 p.m. on a December night, alone at the kitchen table. Nathan was asleep. I had not told him I was doing it that night because I had not known I was doing it that night until approximately 11:30, when I finished reviewing the initial submission package for the fourth time, and understood that I had been reviewing it for the fourth time because I was looking for a reason to wait, and there was no good reason to wait. The SEC whistleblower portal interface is functional and unremarkable. You upload your documents, you complete the submission form, you review, you submit. There is a confirmation screen, a reference number, a receipt email. I watched the confirmation screen appear. Reference, SECWB 2408819. Submission received. One timestamp in a federal database that now knew what I knew. I closed the laptop and sat in my dark kitchen for a while, then I went to bed. The next 14 months were the most operationally demanding of my professional life, which is a sentence I do not make lightly given that I restructured $47 million in debt at 30. I made 3 submissions to the SEC portal over 14 months, each one building on the previous. The first established the Greystone structure, the shell entities, the threshold structuring, the payment pattern. The second added the authorization chain. Every wire transfer bore an authorization code traceable to Colton's credentials, and the approval workflow I had designed showed clearly that his divisional authority covered transactions under $100,000 without secondary sign-off, a gap I had flagged internally in a memo, which was now in the submission as evidence of the specific mechanism used. The third submission was where the case changed. I had been looking for months for evidence of whether Colton had acted alone or in coordination. The structuring was too sophisticated for someone without guidance. The threshold knowledge, specifically the $50,000 reporting threshold, was not common knowledge in a company where only 3 people had visibility into the reporting architecture. I was one of the 3. The second was Dale, the CFO. The third was my father. I found the email in February. My father has a home office. He has a brass key hanging behind the monogrammed pens on his desk organizer, which I have seen every time I have been in that room for 20 years. It opens the bottom drawer. The drawer has a hanging file system. I was in his home office on a Saturday morning in February, helping my mother organize tax documents. This was a task I had performed every February for a decade because my parents' personal tax situation was complicated and my father's organizational system was optimistic, and I found in a folder labeled CS Vendor Review a printed email chain. The subject line was, Re Greystone, handle quietly. My father's reply, sent to Colton's personal email address. I have reviewed the arrangement. The numbers work for the quarter. Make sure the invoicing doesn't cross the threshold. I'll handle the board questions. I read it twice. I photographed both pages on my phone. I put the folder back exactly where I had found it. I finished helping my mother with the tax documents. I drove home. I sat in my car in my driveway for 8 minutes. Then I went inside and opened the SEC portal. The New Year's Eve invitation arrived on cream cardstock with gold borders engraved. A very special announcement will be made at midnight. Your presence is requested. My mother called the afternoon it arrived. Wear something nice, sweetheart. This is Colton's night. A pause. The specific pause she used to signal that what came next was the real message. And Evelyn, don't make this harder than it has to be. 6 words. The same 6 words in the same quiet tone she had used every time the family needed me to be smaller. At board presentations where Colton was credited for strategy I had written. At company events where my father described the leadership team without including my name. At Christmas dinners where my mother found ways to make the conversational space around Colton larger, and the space around me precisely what was required for a person who was present but not central. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'll be there, Mom, I said. I opened my closet. Black structured top, silver earrings. Simple, clean. Nothing that could be read as an occasion. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. Then I sat at my desk and opened the SEC portal one final time. The third submission had been in draft for 3 weeks, 42 pages. Complete timeline from October of the prior year through the February email. Every Greystone transaction cross-referenced with travel records, authorization chains, and signatures. The February email photographed, with metadata showing my father's email address in the header and the timestamp. I had been waiting for the right moment to submit it. I looked at the draft. I thought about the invitation. A very special announcement will be made at midnight. My father had chosen midnight. He had chosen a stage. He had chosen 100 140 witnesses. I decided to choose the same clock. I did not submit the draft that afternoon. I saved it. I put on the black top and the silver earrings. I got in the car. The Grand Meridian Ballroom was everything my father knew how to build when he wanted to make a statement. Crystal chandeliers throwing prismatic light across the ceiling, 3 champagne towers near the entrance, a 12-piece band that had been playing since 8, board members and executives and the mayor of Charlotte and a journalist from the business section of the paper who had covered Sears Meridian since the IPO. 140 people, all of them understanding in the specific way that invited guests at a private New Year's Eve party understand that they had been selected to witness something. I found Nathan at the bar. He handed me a glass. He looked at my face. "Tonight?" he asked. "Tonight," I said. We were at the back of the room. I had positioned us there deliberately, close enough to see my father's face at the microphone, far enough to be peripheral in the photographs. At 11:58, my father walked to the stage. He told the story of the company the way he told it at every significant event. The warehouse on Mercer Street, the first contract, the first employee, the IPO. He told it well. He had always told it well. My father's gift was narrative, which is one of the reasons the company worked. He could make people believe in a version of things. He could make the story feel inevitable in retrospect and exciting in prospect simultaneously. Then he looked at Colton in the front row. "Every founder faces one question," he said. "Who carries it forward?" He lifted his glass. "Tonight, I am officially passing Sears Meridian Group to my son, the one who actually earned it." Standing ovation. The room was on its feet. Noisemakers appeared. The band shifted to something celebratory. The confetti cannons were being positioned. Someone started the countdown. 10. I opened my clutch. 9. Unlocked my phone. 8. The SEC portal loaded. The draft submission. 42 pages. The gray button, approve and submit. 7. 6. Nathan was close. Not performing anything, just present. 5. 4. You're sure? His voice was very quiet. 3. I've been sure for 14 months. 2. I took one breath. Not for courage. I did not need courage for this. I took it the way I take a breath before I present a board analysis, to clear the space between preparation and execution. 1. The terrace exploded. The room erupted. My father's face at the microphone, chin lifted, eyes bright. The expression of a man whose story has just arrived at the moment he always believed it was building toward. I pressed the button. Submission received. Reference number SECWB 2541738. Timestamp 12:0803 a.m. 3 seconds past midnight. I locked my phone. I picked up my champagne glass. I took one sip. It was very good champagne. I waited. The chief of staff's name was Marcus Webb. He had worked for my father for 9 years, and he had the quality of a long-tenured employee who has learned to read his principal's situation with peripheral vision, who notices things without appearing to look for them. He crossed the room at 12:11 a.m. I watched him find my father near the stage. I watched the approach. Steady, not rushed, with the specific body language of a person delivering information that requires privacy. I watched him lean close. I watched my father's face. The smile did not fade. It stopped, like a switch, there and then not there, with no transition between, the way a face goes when the body receives news that the mind hasn't fully processed yet and the surface simply fails. He set his champagne glass on the nearest table without finishing it. He turned slowly. His eyes moved through the room. I could see them tracking, searching, and they found me, at the back wall, with my champagne glass, looking directly at him. I held his gaze. He turned back to Marcus, said something. Then he walked to the stage and picked up the microphone. The room was still celebrating. The band was playing. People were hugging. The confetti was still falling. My father tapped the microphone. "Excuse me." His voice had the quality of a man operating on training rather than feeling. "Excuse me, please." The room quieted. "Due to a regulatory matter that has just come to our attention, the leadership transition announced earlier tonight will be put on hold, effective immediately, pending review." Complete silence. The particular silence of a room that has just been celebrating and does not yet understand what has changed. Colton was standing 3 feet from the stage. He had a noisemaker in his hand. "Dad," his voice was very quiet, "you just told every person in this room that I am CEO. Not here, Colton." "What do you mean not here? You stood up there and said—" "I said not here." My father's voice cracked, not with grief, not with anger, with authority that had run out of road. He handed the microphone back to the event coordinator. He walked off the stage. He did not look at me again. Colton looked at the room. 140 people looking back at him with the expression of an audience that has just watched a magic trick go wrong and is still trying to understand what they saw. He looked at me. I looked at him. I finished my champagne. The SEC enforcement process that followed is not mine to narrate in full, because much of it is not public and some of it is ongoing. What I can tell you is the shape of it. The third submission, the one filed at 12:03 a.m. on New Year's Day, triggered a formal enforcement inquiry within 18 days. This is faster than average, which I attribute to the completeness of the documentation and the fact that 2 previous submissions had already established the foundation. The inquiry was assigned to an enforcement attorney at the SEC's Atlanta regional office named Diane Reeves, who had 12 years in securities enforcement and who called me in January for an initial interview. She was precise and thorough and had the quality I respect most in professionals who handle difficult matters. She did not tell me what I wanted to hear. She told me what the process required and what the timeline looked like and where the uncertainties were. The inquiry became a formal investigation in March. My father retained outside counsel, a firm in Washington, D.C. that specialized in SEC defense. His personal attorney also filed a request for the investigation's scope, which is standard practice. Colton retained separate counsel. Nathan is a litigation attorney, not a securities attorney, but he had referred me to a colleague months earlier, a woman named Patricia Patricia Howe, 17 years in Dodd-Frank whistleblower representation, who had handled 14 SEC whistleblower cases and whose name appeared on 3 published opinions in the area. Patricia filed the formal whistleblower representation agreement in January and has been my attorney of record since. The company's independent board members called an emergency session in February. I was asked to present the audit findings. I did. I presented them the way I present everything, chronologically, with documentation, without interpretation beyond what the numbers required. 3 board members resigned within 60 days. 2 of them had received the quarterly filings with the misstated vendor payments. They retained their own counsel. I was asked in March to serve as acting CFO during the investigation, given that the CFO had placed himself on administrative leave pending a review of his knowledge of the vendor structure. I accepted. It was the right decision for the company, and it was within my capability, and there was nobody else. I have been the first person in the building every morning for 8 years. That did not change. My mother called on a Sunday in April. I had been expecting the call for 3 months. I had not been certain how I would feel when it arrived, and I want to be honest, I still am not entirely certain. The relationship between me and my mother is not simply a story of injury and distance. There was real love in it, real warmth at times, the specific warmth of a woman who loved both her children and simply expressed it differently, depending on which child was in the room. That is its own kind of injury, and it is also a more complicated one than the fraud, which has the clarity of documented fact. She did not call to apologize. She called to ask if it could be made to go away. This is going to destroy the family, she said. The family is the choices people made in it, I said. I didn't make those choices. She was quiet. I know, she said. It came out small. I know you didn't. I don't know what we are to each other now. I know we are still something. We have had 4 conversations since January, and they have been careful and real in a way that our conversations had not always been, and I am choosing to count that as something rather than nothing, because it is something. It is not everything. It is what is true right now. The SEC issued a formal notice of investigation to Sears Meridian Group in May. The notice is public record. I am not going to tell you the outcome of that investigation, because it is ongoing. What I can tell you is that the Dodd-Frank whistleblower program, under the right circumstances with the right documentation, is exactly what it was designed to be. What I can also tell you is that I sat in a ballroom on New Year's Eve and listened to my father hand the company I had spent 8 years building to my brother on the grounds that Colton had earned it. And I thought about every morning I had arrived first, every audit I had run, every debt restructuring, every memo I had written that had gone unread until the crisis it predicted arrived, every quarterly filing I had signed in good faith before I knew what I was signing. I thought about all of it, and I pressed send. There is a thing Nathan says about litigation that I have been thinking about since January. He says the most dangerous thing you can do in a legal matter is confuse the story you want to tell with the story the evidence actually tells. The evidence has its own narrative. Your job is to present it clearly and let it run. I had been presenting evidence clearly for 14 months. At midnight on New Year's Eve, my father chose a stage and a microphone and 140 witnesses to tell the story he wanted to tell. He just didn't know I'd chosen the same clock, and I had more pages.